names like NVIDIA and Microsoft have climbed some 40 and 50%. So investors' 401ks may be rising, but our next guest says that might be in contrast to their sentiment. Wall Street Journal chief economics commentator Greg Ip writes in a column today that AI is ushering in the most joyless tech revolution ever. And he's joining me right now. Greg, it's great to see you.
Thanks, Julie.
This has been something I've been trying to ask investors about, that, yeah, your portfolio's going like gangbusters, but if you talk to people on the street, if you talk to your friends about how they feel about AI, the answer is not great. So how should investors be thinking about that sort of disconnect?
Well, this is an issue principally, Julie, about ordinary Americans, not necessarily investors. Look, if you happen to be one of those lucky you who has a 401k chock full of Mag 7 stocks and you've had them there for several years, you're feeling pretty good, financially secure. But if you're in your 20s or your 30s and you're trying to think of your career, you have a degree in one of the standard kind of like professional areas like computer science or finance, you're really wondering, is there going to be a career for me? Is this technology going to take my career paths away from me? Or alternatively, maybe you just don't understand the technology very well. Why does it give me the answers that it gives me? And it's sort of like feels a little eerie. So I guess what I'm saying here is that we can all sort of like identify how transformative this tech is and why it could be great for the economy in the end. But I think a lot of people just are very wary of it and uncomfortable with it. And by the way, this is a big contrast to a generation ago. People felt much better about the dot-com boom at that time.
Well, I want to dig into that a little bit, because I think that whenever one expresses skepticism about AI and how ultimately helpful it might be, the answer is, oh, well, in every innovation cycle, you get this sort of hand-wringing and questions about it. But as you just pointed out, that's not necessarily the case.
No, I think that's true. And people are always ambivalent about technology, right? I mean, with the internet originally, and they worried about their privacy. With social media, they worried about their kids getting cyberbullied. With computers, a lot of people worried about losing their jobs. So the fact that a new technology provokes these mixed feelings, there's nothing new about that. And it may, in the end, be the case with AI as well. Perhaps in a few years' time, when more people have had a chance to use it and some of the apocalyptic scenarios have not come to pass, people will feel better about it. But right now, that's not the case. And it is in contrast to how most of these other technologies have evolved over the last 25 years. And I think it's a kind of a warning sign for society at large, basically, because I think that this is one piece of the many things that are bothering people right now. It's like, if they felt better about the cost of living, maybe AI wouldn't bother them so much. But given that they're bothered by so many other things right now, it just feels like another thing compounding their insecurity.
And by the way, Greg, all of those examples you just mentioned, those things did happen. In other words, with the internet, we did lose our privacy. With social media, our kids did get cyberbullied, and other terrible things have happened. So in other words, people's worst fears, in many cases, were realized, but we just sort of move forward anyway. So I guess in this case, the question is, are we going to listen to those lessons of yesteryear and regulate AI in a different way? It doesn't feel like we're going to.
Yeah, and I would also, again, I started my career covering the dot-com boom, and the feel was very different. That one, it was almost like an adventure, right? I mean, everybody knew somebody who was quitting their job to go start a dot-com business, right? And it had kind of an absurd feel to it. I mean, some of us remember things like the sock puppet mascot for pets.com and so on. So we all kind of understood there was an absurdity to it, but it was kind of an exciting and playfulness to it. And that feeling to me is completely absent today. The companies that are building upon AI, profiting from AI, they're not these scrappy little startups. They're massive, incredibly wealthy companies like Microsoft and NVIDIA that a lot of people are already kind of suspicious about. Like startups like OpenAI seem very kind of like distant and detached from ordinary people. So the entire kind of like atmosphere around AI is quite different. And if I'm in the AI industry, I would want to not ignore that, right? And in my column, I point out the example of nuclear power. I mean, if you go back to the 50s and the 60s, everybody said this is going to be transformative. It will give us electricity that is so plentiful that it's too cheap to meter. But eventually we had the 3 Mile Island accident, and people were never really comfortable with it. And nuclear kind of like ground to a halt. And right now, if you look at the surveys, people even though, as you were saying, they get that this technology is useful, like other technologies have been useful, they want to see it regulated more, and they are very untrusting of this industry vis-a-vis other industries.
So, from an economics perspective, then, how do we think about the potential of AI if there is this sort of sentiment issue with it?
I don't really know. I mean, I quote in my column a couple of studies that talk about extreme scenarios where there really are no humans necessary except for tiny portions of economic activity. I mean, that's pretty dystopian. And it's probably not the base case. I mean, there will be disruption, but it won't be like, the movie Wall-E where everybody's living in space and being, fed by robots. Mm-hmm. So I think that in time, the sell-off we're experiencing right now, in fact, might be one sort of like returning to Earth phase for this industry, and people will feel better about it. But I also think that it probably behooves society at large to think hard about how this technology is affecting people's expectations for the future, and to realize that in an environment where people are very mistrusting of a lot of things out there, is you don't want to sort of like make this a reason to be even more mistrustful.
Greg, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.